Hi, hello, and welcome to my channel. Normally in these reading wrap-up videos, I just kind of sit here and we run through all of the books that I read during that month. But today we're going to be doing something a little different because one, this month just like really got away from me and I didn't honestly read that much. And two, what I did read, I didn't film. But also three, if I did film it, hopefully you've already seen it. So why do I repeat myself, you know? So here's what we're going to do with this video, but then also I think just from now on, we're going to run through all of the videos and the things that I've done this month so that you can kind of get a glance at the books that I've read. And if anything kind of like tickles your fancy, you want to watch a certain video, I'll have them all linked down below. The first thing we did this month was go to the bookstore and we actually picked out some book cover books together. Basically, I went to the bookstore, picked out a bunch of cool covers, and then asked you guys to vote on them, which was super, super fun. And for anyone that voted, thank you again so much. I know I said that in another video, but like literally that was like the best thing ever. I definitely want to do more of that kind of thing. We also read and watched Daisy Jones and the Six. We built some bookshelves and then I gave you a little book tour of all of the books that I had at the time, which we definitely have added some more because our following video was a book haul. So we're gonna do a lot of like TBR, physical TBR reading this coming month in April. And that is basically all that I uploaded this month. I'm trying to upload 2 videos a week, but like I said, last month just like really got away from me. But I do have a lot of really fun things planned for this month and I'm so freaking excited. Now let's go ahead and go into the second half of this video, which is talking about all of the books that I've read this month or the past month that I didn't tell you about or I didn't do a video on, which again is basically everything that I read this month except for Daisy Jones and the Six. And the very first book that I actually read this month was A Game of Fate by Scarlett St. Clair. And this is essentially a spin-off series for A Touch of Darkness, which is a Hades and Persephone retelling. The Touch of Darkness is in Persephone's perspective, and this series of books is actually going to be from Hades' perspective, which is super, super cool. In general, I'm a really big fan of multiple perspectives in books, but this concept of having 2 whole separate books of the same story from different perspectives is like 10 times better. With that being said, it's not like as repetitive as it might sound. The Touch of Darkness, that one is definitely a lot more centered around the romance. You get a lot more of that kind of like romantic tension. With the Hades series, I will admit that there wasn't as much tension, but also Hades is portrayed much darker in A Game of Fate than he is in The Touch of Darkness, which I actually really liked because he is the god of the underworld. And after reading A Game of Fate, I realized you really didn't get to know him very well in The Touch of Darkness, and you definitely get to know him a lot better in this story, which is super, super cool. Also, too, another thing that I really liked specific to Hades versus A Touch of Darkness is because Hades is a god, the majority of the other characters that he interacts with are other gods. The one thing I felt that was kind of not really missing, but something I wanted more of from The Touch of Darkness was more magic, and you definitely get that with the Hades book. One thing I will say though is if you haven't read A Touch of Darkness, like if I've never read that series, I don't know that I would have enjoyed A Game of Fate as much. I think the things that I really, really enjoyed about it were because I read the other book first. And honestly, if I can go back in time, I would read the books in tandem. So I'd read like A Touch of Darkness and then The Game of Fate and then the second book in the Touch of Darkness series and then the second book in the Hades series, if that makes sense. Anyway, that's enough. I feel like I've been talking about this book for 10 years, so let's move on to the next one. The next book that we have is The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. And this book I got because my sister and I have our own little 2-person book club. Basically every month we're going to be picking out a book together to kind of like buddy read, and this is the one that we picked for March. And it was definitely a good pick because again, 5 stars. This was so freaking good. This is basically a murder mystery like whodunit meets Groundhog's Day. There's a character called Evelyn Hardcastle and her parents are throwing her a party and she's going to die at that party. Basically, a guy named Aiden wakes up every single day, the day of the party, in a different body of a different guest that went to that party. And he's basically given 7 days and 7 guests to embody to figure out who kills Evelyn Hardcastle. I hope that made sense. I'm someone that likes to kind of like try to figure out who done it or kind of like what the twist is going to be or something like that. There was one thing in the very beginning of the book when he was still in his first body that kind of gave me a clue to something that was going on, and I was correct about that. But after that, there's basically like a constant flow of twists and turns and new information, so I essentially just gave up on trying to guess anything and just enjoyed the ride. If you love a good murder mystery, I highly recommend this book. Next up on our list, we have Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. This is essentially about Emily Wilde, who is a professor at Cambridge, and she goes basically to like a really small, not very well-known town because there is a type of fairy there that isn't very well documented, and she's in the process of making an encyclopedia of fairies, and she's almost done with it, but she's just missing this one type of fairy that is in this one location. And then somewhere along the way, her rival, who also is a professor at the same school, decides that it would be a good idea to join her on this little adventure. When I originally went into reading this book, I was kind of expecting it to be a lot more kind of like fantasy, full of fairies, that type of deal, but this ended up being a lot more kind of like real life, but with fairies. For the most part, it was just her kind of like doing little research, going into the woods, trying to find fairies, talking to the villagers and that kind of thing. Like, the overall vibes for this book were just so cute and cozy. I don't know, honestly, that I've ever read like a cozy book until this one. Like, this just gave me such good, warm, fuzzy feels. At the very end of this book, it does say, the story of Emily Wilde and Wendell Bamblebee, which is her rival that I mentioned earlier, will continue in book number 2. So there is going to be a second book, and I'm very, very excited for it. This book literally just came out, so I don't imagine that the second book is going to come out anytime soon. I literally couldn't find any information about it online, but hopefully it doesn't take too long for the second book to come out because I want more comfy, cozy Emily Wilde stories. That being said, I was very much in the mood to continue reading more like cozy fantasy, and the only book that I had on my physical TBR that I feel like could have potentially fit the bill for that was The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. I love this book. I think I liked this one, honestly. No, they're pretty much the same. They have different vibes, but the feelings that I have after reading them are the same. I'm very fond of both of these books and all of the characters inside of these books. They were so good. This is basically about a guy named Linus Baker who is a very like by the book, follow the rules type, and he basically works for the department in charge of magical youth. And essentially the whole idea behind that is kids that have magic are sent to orphanages. And I say orphanage with bunny ears because nobody ever actually adopts these children because having magic is kind of looked down upon, people are afraid of it, that kind of a thing. And basically Linus is in charge of going to these orphanages and auditing them, like making sure that the kids are happy and healthy and taken care of, essentially. And like I said, Linus is very by the book. He doesn't break any rules. He does everything literally exactly how their code book says. So because of that, he's actually given a classified assignment to go to this island, a house in the Cerulean Sea, where like the extra dangerous magical children live. One of those children being Lucifer, like literally 6-year-old Lucifer, which was fantastic. So basically, the majority of this book is him at this island kind of interacting and developing relationships with the kids on the island. And it's just another cute, cozy, warm, fuzzy book, and I would literally recommend this to anyone. The last and final book that we have for this video is Wayward, and this is by Amelia Hart. Again, I was hoping for another like cute, cozy fantasy, but this was not that. But it was still really, really good. Basically, this book is about 3 different generations of witches, and it essentially flips between each of their perspectives and their timelines. In chronological date order, we have Altha, which is A-L-T-H-A. I don't know how to actually pronounce that. She's the one that lived in 1619, and she's essentially on trial for being a witch. And then we have Violet, who grew up in 1942, and basically she lives in a time where like her brother goes to school and she's jealous because she wants to learn all the things that he's learning, and she's basically just like trapped in this big estate because her family is like, I don't think royalty, but I can't remember. I literally just finished reading this book, but I don't remember specific details like that. I have a horrible memory. I think her dad is like a lord or something like that. So they live in this big like estate, and she's kind of like trapped there and is raised to be like this perfect little woman, essentially. She definitely, I think, did have like my favorite story. Like hers was the one that I was most excited to keep reading. I liked all of them, but hers was my favorite. And then I think Altha's, and then last but not least we have Kate. and she lives in 2019, and essentially she is in a relationship where she's being abused, and she basically escapes to a cottage that was left to her by her great aunt Violet from 1942. So it's really interesting to kind of see how similar their lives end up being and the kind of situations that they end up kind of getting themselves into. But then it's also cool because there are significant differences because of the times that they live in. Also, to the cover is very spring appropriate, and we are currently in spring, so loved it. And with that, that is all of the books that I read in the month of March. They were literally all 5 stars. Very different books for the most part, but all so good. Highly recommend all of them. I will leave links to all of them down below if you're interested in checking any of them out. If you read anything good in March, let me know down below in the comments. I think that's everything that I have to say. I hope you have / have had the most amazing of days, and I will hopefully see you guys in the next one. Bye!